Technology.
All right. Welcome to the Express Technical Committee meeting for March 25th, 2020. We have pretty much most of our triagers join us directly today. I'm so far the only one who is representing the actual technical committee who's attending right now. We have, since our last meeting, we've been doing various things around Express 5, particularly around getting a lot of our repos, kind of like getting it up to date, getting in some of the major things merged and released, specifically things like the routing changes, which are going to be the biggest change. I've started a 4.18 branch in the main Express repo, which is what's going to hold our 4 changes that we'll have deprecations for some of the things that are landing into 5, and we'll get that rolling. I have worked to merge a couple, I merged the 4 branch into the 5 branch, so the 5 branch is currently up to date with 4. That was pretty out of date, and so we'll get that going here. I know we've been working on a little bit to get some of the docs updated on the website. And then what we'll do is we'll start with some of the proposed topics here. So Jaresh had proposed a couple various topics for today. Oops, I was on the wrong meeting. So I don't know if you want to take it away, Jaresh, or I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. My apologies.
That's fine. That's right. So the 2 things which I propose to happen in this meeting is, number 1, reviewing and landing of 3621, if that is possible. From your explanation, it looks like you have been working behind the scenes, like cutting the branch for 4.18 with the corresponding deprecation PR targeted to be included in that. I'm just wanting to know, is there anything that is blocking on that before you could actually do that? Or do we want to look at as a team on that and do it in this meeting? The very reason I'm asking that is because looks like, I mean, the deprecation could go actually in a manner that heralds the release of 5, and that would actually set the the next very first step for releasing 5. So for me, that seems to be the most important first step from external point of view. So if we can make sure that step is taken at the earliest, that would be really good. That's number 1. Number 2 is I would like to have a conversation around the one which we discussed in the agenda item, which is about the slowness in general, but probably I would like to hear from you on this particular thing, and then we can step into that, take some action, and then move on.
Sure. What was the particular, just to make sure that I start off on the right thing. You said that you wanted to hear on the particular item, so I just want to make sure I'm clear on what that particular item that you actually wanted to hear before, like, I end up in some kind of rambling of something, who knows.
It's basically for 208.
208. Oh, 4208.
Yeah, deprecate extended query parser. That is supposed.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry. Yeah. I was looking at the one that you had linked in the actual meeting one, which was 3621. So I was just making, okay, I see. So that one instead.
Yeah, 3621 is blocked on 4208.
Right. Yeah. And so, and the reason is because this typically it's just the release like progress in Express. So like typically what we would do is we would land it in the previous major. So like we would land the deprecation, which is pretty much done. I was just looking at it a little bit or like an hour ago um, to get ready to get it all, landed into the 4.18 branch. So we would typically get that merged in. Deprecations are things that we include in minor releases, not patch releases. I think it might be called out in December. I'm not 100% sure, but at least that's what we practice at least. Um, then once that's there in 4.18, we would typically then, go ahead and release 4.18, forward merge that into the 5 branch, and then the 5 branch would basically be there with the deprecated one, which then we would plop on top of it the actual removal of the deprecation itself with the actual implementation. And part of that makes it certainly much easier because you don't have to resolve so many merge conflicts in that case as well. And so then that's the typical pattern, if that makes sense. The other, and so that's basically what I am working to get done here with all this. We actually, as you know too, as part of the other thing is that we had a backlog of a bunch of pull requests to the main repo. And so apparently our Travis CI setup was actually broken, and you had noted that the app voyeur was a little bit broken too. Got the app voyeur fixed on Sunday, got Travis CI all back to working again this morning, and have since been trying to chew through and get all of these landed on their way up. So I was looking at what we have to get landed, and whether or not we should actually do a 4.17 patch and then follow it up with a 4.18. But I think that is probably just like the only things that are changing are some dep updates, which don't really matter that much. Like they're not like critical or anything like that. Some of them are already floating anyways on their patch. So I figure what we've done in the past anyways is we'll just roll it all up into the minor 4.18. And so basically trying to land all of the non 4.18 changes onto master currently, things like simple doc changes, like README changes on there, getting the other stuff like the contributing changes landed. So that would include like the repo captains and all that stuff, and trying to figure out like, I know Wes said he was going to do some kind of edits on the triage doc, and he made that pull request, but I wasn't 100% clear if he was going to do further ones. I know that John has provided some typos, so I can go ahead and at least merge those. So other than that, like we haven't really heard much on Wes from that since the cup passed too. So I think we'll probably just go ahead and land that. And then that's basically, once we get all that done, I figure we'll put 4.18 on that, which opens up a 4.18 release branch so the community has time to understand what changes are and figure that out. That's kind of like our opportunity path for the community to actually, preview upcoming changes before it's suddenly their project just has them. It has helped us catch quite a few regressions in the past, so has been quite valuable. And then we'll get that, which includes all your deprecation one, which you're pointing out, and the other deprecation one that is also finished. Let me see who did that one. That was John as well. So that would be our status deprecation. Get those in there. Get that released.
Yeah, the status deprecation needs a little bit more work, which we can maybe talk about in a
right.
minute.
Yep, I actually kind of forgot about that I meant to reply to you this morning, but did not.
It's okay, yeah. But so specifically on 4208, which I linked to in chat for anybody that isn't following on it, it looks like the last thing that happened was, Doug, you pushed up some changes to get it up to standard JS formatting. Um, is this one ready to be approved? I know we're not ready to merge it just yet because you've got to set up the branches and all that stuff. But if you look at this one right now, Doug, is there anything else that you would block on?
You're talking about the deprecation for the query parser, is that correct? Just to
Yeah, 4208. There's
Yep.
a link to it in chat.
No, yep, and that is correct. And that's actually why I just pushed up just to get that, because I was going to get that landed. So I will basically, my typical process will be, once it's literally about to be landed, basically take all those commits, squash them into one, get that actually on top of the branch. So then when I merge it in, GitHub automatically closes the PR as merged and everything. So that's pretty much the process. Of course, that also helps double check that everything's green, even though stuff has changed. And so that will get it all merged. And I'm hoping to get the 4.18 branch PR up tonight before I go to sleep. And get at least, which means at least there'll have to be some differences on 4.18, even open up a pull request. And so that is definitely at the top of my list to get on there. There isn't a lot of changes at 4.18. We have someone reported a router bug, which I worked and got fixed yesterday. That will be in there as well. Yeah, so certainly anything else you might think. I actually made a milestone as well on Express's repo, in case you're curious, called 4.18, and I tried to tag things with it. I'm sure I've probably missed some stuff just because I haven't gone through all of the PRs and issues yet, because there's a backlog of them, so there's a lot to go through. But I did try to get a lot of them all tagged with 4.18. And of course, once we open the pull request and I list it out there, we'll be able to make for sure that we're not missing anything. But as far as any changes to that pull request, it looks good. That's basically why I was just like, oh, I'll just remove some of those semicolons. So it's standard, and just push that commit up. And other than that, it was good. I noticed when I pushed it up, that's when I noticed that Travis was all broken. And I saw people reporting it this morning, though I had to actually unauthorize and reauthorize Travis to get it working again. So that is all fixed up.
So
I hope that answers your question.
The cutting of 4.18 and then followed by releasing as an NPM package, is these two things are manual, or are there any scripting or automation that's basically attached to that? For example, the moment you cut a new branch, it gets into an NPM publication.
So, I mean, the branch is just where we have this commit stage that would be the release. And that way, once we merge the branch into master, and that's when you would use like npm version minor command to make the release itself.
Okay.
It's not, there's no actual automation around it besides running the commands at this time. We actually did talk about that a while ago, and there was a big problem with automating npm publish when you have two-factor auth, because you have to actually input the one-time token at the time of publish. And so a CI is not able to do such a thing. So we did have a lot of talk about that I think in our discussions repo and/or in package maintenance. And I know that people from NPM acknowledge the problem and we're working to create a solution for it. But I don't think there is an actual solution from them just yet.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So we're not able to really automate. And like it actually, before there was a thoughts where we would turn 2FA off, but now with the NPM making what they call security insights, people can now see what packages were published without 2FA. And the idea is that they want to start to surface that. So basically like I feel like it's almost going to become like the SSL lock, for example. So packages, it'll be more obvious which packages have not been published with 2FA. And so we definitely want to go the 2FA route because of how NPM's direction is going. So that was our sticking point on automating the release, if you're curious.
Yeah. So my key question right now is, what support you require for getting 4.18 out. I know you are the only person in this meeting right now with the commit access. So basically, when we are looking at, I'm not really looking at a timeline or a commitment as such, but what support is required and what is the potential date you can think about for these two things to happen, that is 4.18 at the repo level and at the NPM level.
Yeah, so I mean, I am the only actual Express committer in this meeting, though of course I'm not the only Express committer. Every TC member can commit there, and we also have a few other people who are the committer role in addition to some of the TC members. Obviously, like, just part of it is, if especially need help is like if there's that milestone. So like trying to figure out like what is actually 4.x candidates can get that milestone tag. We can always remove the milestone if it's not, obviously, but like at least like that's one thing that is on my list, but certainly anybody can do that, which would be a big help. Trying to what's it called? I don't know if anybody can. I don't know how it exactly works. So I've been like rebasing a bunch of the those pull requests. I know it's not committing it to the Express repo. It's actually committing it back to the originating repo. I don't know if anybody can just do that or not. I don't know how those permissions exactly map, but that is not very difficult. So it's really just trying to work its way through here. I tried to work through the doc stuff first because those seemed the easiest low-hanging fruit to just go and like go through there, and because I mean docs are pretty much like pretty straightforward in landing them. So I've been trying to land. I've been working on landing all those. That's why I've been working on landing the docs first, if that makes sense.
I think you need write access to the repo in order to at least to rebase someone's PR without opening a new one. I think you need commit access.
Yeah, to their repo, is that right?
Or I think that like there's a default where committers, basically if you have a commit bit to Express, you can push to somebody else's, like when people open a PR, it checks a box, which gives you commit access to their branch, basically.
Yeah, that basically says allow the collaborators to edit your commit.
Yeah, like as an example, as a triager, I don't have commit access, so I can't push to anybody's branch or anything like that.
Yeah, the checkbox which we are talking about that appears in the PR, which allows other collaborators to edit the contributors' commit, basically applies to the collaborators, which essentially means that assumes a committer in the repo, so which the triagers do not have.
Makes sense. Even on that, like according to our own conduct, I think like there are at least a few of you that we should start onboarding as committers here soon anyways. So it pretty much, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not from the read, is that basically it says, hey, if you've made like a few like, you know, code contributions into there, is that the idea is that, you know, to onboard someone as a committer basically. So that's kind of like the bar, if that makes sense. And we don't currently separate a lot of these repos. Obviously, maybe that will start changing once there's like repo captains and they become more separate. But right now, we basically just basically treat it as like committer to the whole org, really. So that's kind of like how it goes. So that means that basically, my point with that is that, at least according to it, following it with saying like landing some contributions, because of the way we manage it, it doesn't even have to be to the specific Express repo, if that makes sense. Kind of like I was speaking like last week, is that all the repos are important, of course, to the whole ecosystem, especially the ones that are direct in Express itself, but let alone some of those other ones like, you know, Express Session, which I know a few of you have been helping out with, because that's also a really big one as well, especially not only in just usage itself, but, just popularity. So, but yeah, I think we should start getting some of you on board in that role anyways, which can then help with this as well.
So I'm sure that time will come, Doug. At the moment, I try and be humble about it. Like, there's 2,500 lines of unit tests in session. And I was leaving those to later. And now I've got a far greater appreciation of people that maintain things, especially after the same site change on Chrome the other weekend, which kind of took me by surprise.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot. That's one of the reasons why I personally have it was actually from doing open source before I was in JavaScript, have put a lot of emphasis on tests, because tests help in a lot of ways, including having more people contribute, because it's much more, it helps it so it's a lot easier to contribute, and when it's breaking something else. You know what I mean? When the test just failed, gives you that safety net. So that's why, especially, there can be a lot of tests in there. Express session is a good example of one where there's a lot of tests, though it could probably be split apart into a few files to make it a little bit better than like one enormous file. But Express session is also
I have a plan.
Yeah, because Express session is pretty complicated, just like Express itself. And so Express has it split out into a bunch of files. And so, yeah, Express session can definitely be split into some more files because it has a lot of tests just because it's complicated. It's the nature of it, but doesn't mean we can't organize them better. But yeah, so yeah, that's awesome. Love that. Thoughts along that. Sorry, I know I've kind of like ended up veering away, so I'm just kind of stopping myself just to make sure that I don't go too.
Yeah, basically, so coming back to the 4.x line, I see 6 PRs tagged for 4.x. 6 items basically. So, I mean, just wanted to know, where do we stand, or at a high level, what is the challenge, or what we are looking at to get this done. I know the last one, 4.2.8 is all done, just to be merged. Not sure about the others. So, any help, any code changes, or any review testing, or any forward progression in terms of addressing the review comments, anything that we can do in this?
Yep. Yeah, I think that, like, I don't have them off the top of my head. I would have to go through them. I don't know if we want to sit here and like wait for me to like read them live. But that's pretty much all I'm doing tonight. So I can definitely go through it and get that list out there, which I need to get, which I mentioned in that other issue I need to get better at, is like, just listing out my thoughts if I plan to change them, because sometimes I don't always get an opportunity to, because things in various ways come up and become more important. Apparently there's for example, apparently there's one of the dependencies of the HPS module, which is part of our pillars.js organization, that is now being flagged in NPM audit. So need to figure that out. I did a little bit of research, and it looks like we might have to wait for the subdependency to update itself first, but I didn't look that hard just yet. And so that's an example. I'm just using it as an example of like sometimes where suddenly I end up doing something else with my open source time, because at least like security stuff usually ends up at the top of my list typically. But that is kind of like where we're at. I need to there's a pull request there's one pull request that's on that I can definitely say on the top of my mind that I was just looking at before here that needed some changes to it, that I was once again gonna do, but if other people can split apart. So there's this one that's called, the number of it is 4174, and it's like feature / 4171 depd, but it includes a few different changes into it, and some of them need to just be removed. Thankfully, they're separate commits, so I figured that was probably pretty easy to do, but they have some review comments, and that hasn't seemed to have gone anywhere yet. But so we probably just need to split, and also just like probably split that apart anyways. I didn't look too far into just that thought, is that there's a couple review comments that haven't been addressed. And that is updating some of our dependencies, part of that, the big dependency issue, which is part of 418. And in case you haven't seen, if maybe there's some help needed on there too, is that there's the 4171 issue in Express called outdated dependencies. And that has like the whole list. There's been a bunch of back and forth. I made a list of the different ones, and talking about what we need to get done. And I think the only one that was actually done so far of the whole list was the updating IP ADDR, which I published as an update to proxy adder, which also needs to be updated in Express. So that's a PR that probably needs to be made to update the proxy adder. So those are, so that's kind of like at least a high level view of definitely stuff that still needs to be done actively. And so that's that issue that kind of just sat around since looks like February, even though there were comments on it. But so that could help. So especially if you're looking for where to help push forward, that's one, for example, that comes up on my head as well. Like I said, there isn't a lot in 4.18 besides those few things. I got that bug that was reported recently fixed in the router module, and I'm just going to port that over. That's just a get AM to do that. So there is also a few waiting for more info. I was going to look through those just to make for sure that there weren't anything we needed to do for 4. So I closed a few that were obvious where the person never followed up. So I'm just like, well, it's been like, over a month, so let's close that. But so that's another thing we probably need to, that would probably help as well, is just at least those waiting for more infos, just to make sure at least we don't, either they're stale and we can close them, or they gave us more info and we didn't follow up yet, or whatever. But sometimes they can be 4.x changes, like that router bug that was reported.
So technically for Express 5, all that matters is the 2 deprecation warnings coming from 4208 and 4223, which are mandatory to be published in the 4.x lines to herald the Express 5. And all other things are value adds, which can go in 4.x lines independently. So correct me if I'm wrong. If that is the case, do we want to really target all these things for 4.18 as opposed to maybe?
You were just asking for stuff that you could do. I was just trying to figure out some stuff you could do. If that's what the goal is, then there's nothing you can really do. I'm just literally sitting here landing the commits. So if that is what you want, then there isn't anything that that I need help with, if that makes sense. Since
so you mean to say the items which are tagged as 4.x can continue to be in that state,
correct,
and still not necessarily cut into 4.18.
That's correct. There's a separate milestone that I made that tracks what is 4.18. 4.x, those 4.x and 5.x labels are to help us understand, especially if there's a feature or pull request that's added or a bug, which version does it apply to? But
Okay.
that doesn't tell us a target. That's why it's also 4.x, just so it's like, it's the 4 line something. The milestones are what we use to actually designate if there's a specific 4 line that we're trying to land something into.
Okay, I got it. So the bottom line of what you're saying is we don't necessarily need to cut all the 6 items into 4.18 if we think the only 2 deprecations are the most important ones, which we oblige to the users to get a better information before we cut Express 5.
Right, exactly. And so if that's, and like I said, if that's what we want to do, then that's pretty much what I'm working to do, especially after I fiddle around with these CIs, getting them back to working state again, as I was pushing it up. So now it's pretty much just landing up, and now I see @voyeur is red for some reason on this one.
Yeah. So
Like you missed there. But
should we take a call in the meeting about should we go 2 versus 6? What the rest of the team think about that? Or what is your take on that?
on which one? I didn't catch the number.
I mean, the 2 PRs, which are most essential for 4.18 as a blocker for Express 5 versus all the 6 PRs tagged as 4.x that we cut into 4.18. We go which way?
I didn't catch the question at the end. Sorry. Did you say we go which way? I'm not really sure
Yes.
what that meant.
Should we go with the 2 PRs for 4.18 versus we go with all the 6 PRs for 4.18?
Right. So that's the question. I was just going to do the ones that I specifically tagged so far with the milestone and leave it at that. But if we want to add those other ones, we can always tag the milestone with them and include them if that's what we want to do.
Okay. So what about the rest of the team? What do they think? I will definitely go with the best bare minimum thing, which is the two PRs, because that's exactly what we oblige to the user before we go for Express 5.
I'm not sure that I have a strong opinion on it. I'm pretty sure that you're asking what should we consider as blockers for getting 5 out. If it should be the everything that's listed in the milestone, or if it should be, or at least I'm looking at the milestone. There's six things in here. That's what I'm assuming you're talking about.
Yeah, that's like a couple of those are just the issues that point to those pull requests. But yes.
Yeah.
So he was talking about the 6 that of the pull requests that have the 4.x label on it is when he's saying the 6 4.x things.
That's right.
Okay. I'm not looking at those right now. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on it. I guess I want to see 5 get out as soon as we can. But I don't know.
So just from a completely non-technical aspect, a lot of people, and we see people like making comments and they say, well, the project is not going forward. Would it be a good thing psychologically for a project to land it, or are we just pandering because, we're trying to get something out for a milestone? Yeah. Is there any, that are 2 questions. Like, are we doing engineering, or do we need to make a milestone so we put a stake in the ground? And that they are 2 different things.
Yeah, I think what you're asking is one of the things I alluded to in the thread in this for this meeting before it started was like, one of the things that have been expressed is that, there isn't any progress being made, or the progress is going slow. And part of it is, I think a big part of it, like, it's funny because ever since we actually split out into like a ton of modules, that's actually over time that has become the most common statement to make, especially if you look at Express 3. There was constant things landed because every single one of those middlewares were part of Express directly. And it was a lot of code and a lot of churn. And now that they're very separate, not only is the issue tracker, of course, slightly quieter, but of course the code churn is down since there's a lot of code that's all around. So that was, at least, I don't know, that's just my thought of the reason why I feel like it's more common to ask. So I don't know if if it makes sense to surface what commits are being made across the org and issues across the org in some central place that makes it seem like there's activity, or I'm not sure exactly. Obviously the Express repo itself does have issues being made, talked about, and closed fairly regularly. There was definitely, a bunch of a time where commits weren't landing. This past thing, which is what, a lot of it is because the attention was very small and spread across all the repos, which is actually what made Wes create the triagers to basically get the committers like myself, him, Linus, etc., more time to focus on that, and or to get some more people to actually get to the committer level itself and directly help as well, which we're just, which we're ramping up in that area currently as well. So I don't know. I'm just throwing a couple of things out there at least.
Sure. Yeah, because we started the conversation. So let me put my point of view over there. So my main observation is based on, for example, there could be activities that is happening across 90 plus repos in 3 organizations. But when it comes to targeted activity, basically prioritized activity towards meeting a specific goal, that's where I see certain slowness that's happening. And these are probably a couple of reasons why I believe uh, that is the case. Number one, if you look at the items which are tagged for Express 5, probably 4 or 5 PRs, and one of which is 2 years old, and but there is no visible progress, forward progress on that, or there is no enough reviews that's happening on that. Partly to do with less number of committers in the organization, less number of active committers or active TC members. So by far, I could see that for the prioritized items, only review comments coming from you, Doug, which is, in my opinion, is a critical dependency. It actually depends on your personal time, and we have seen in many work items your statement about your personal time is being spent on the open source, which is not part of your paid job, and that statement comes in most of the other PRs. Is fair. I mean, it's absolutely fine from your side, but from the project side, uh, the need that that statement comes in is basically pointing to a wider concern of the project side, that we don't seems to be having enough committers. We don't seem to be having active committers coming and helping on the items where that is absolutely required, whether through paid or unpaid or in whatever form. Um, the other issue is some of the PRs could have been landed much earlier, but it kinds of moves on. I believe more eyes would have solved it much earlier than the current state. If there are committers coming in and actively discussing on that, and more importantly, giving some suggestions to a simple GitHub has a button to provide actual change suggestions. Instead of doing like this, let's do like this, which basically highlights what needs to be done. Just I could click a button and the actual change goes into the commit. So unfortunately, we don't have that facility, or we don't have the people to help with that. So these are the two reasons which I quote as certain items are getting slow. So I'm not saying that the overall activity in the 3 org is less than expected. As an open source thing, people work as volunteers on the volitional choice, etc. So blaming the project or a organization as a whole to be slow is not a good thing from my side. But the whole idea of my statement is coming from the fact that when we have a stated purpose, when we have a set of prioritized items, and we have a set of committers and active collaborators or active triagers, whatever, how much of the energy, how much of the time spent is actually being coherently connected with the uh, assigned or identified items. So that's the part where I see the translation is not happening. Again, it's my personal opinion. I just want to reiterate that. I may be wrong. I can be corrected.
Now, Doug, let me say, so you're probably right, but it's going to take time for triages to become committers. Firstly, like this is a major project. You don't just let people come in. You need to build up some faith and some trust in them to know they're going to turn up for meetings. You know, they're not just going to make one PR and disappear off. And it's going to take some time. We have several, one of the other members I got to join, Ryan isn't here. We have some others that have raised PRs to join. It's going to be 6 months at least before we turn triages into committers. And it's like when people join the organization I work for, we don't give them commit access to start off with. They can raise PRs. And so I hear what you're saying, but I think we've got to give this process a chance. People will want to join. They will want to contribute. A lot of people have made quite a good living out of the Node Express ecosystem. I'm very grateful. Want to give something back. And I think others are too. The more I ask around, the more I find people. So with 3 from the organization that I work for, 2 active ones just signed up, joining, and there will be more, but it's going to take time. And we don't want people, I think the Express team should value reliability and longevity over like just people raising stuff and then disappearing. That's my
agree.
2 cents.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't want the state of Express project to be based on the maturity level of the triages. Triages, in my opinion, is a value add that comes from the package maintenance initiative that we started last year. But the state of the affairs of Express project or Express repo should be based on what is the priorities, what are the targets, what is the roadmap of the project, and how are we faring that with the existing committers and the TC members. So from that perspective, keeping the triages away, what is the forward progress which we are making, and are we happy with that? From that perspective, I see this problem statement. It's not a blame, it's just putting things into the perspective.
Right. And I'll add too, like, I think like Wes has done a lot of work to get, to go and like, ring the bells and collect people, which as you see, like the fact that we have so many people even attending these TC meetings is actually quite awesome compared to even before. We rang the bell before and we got like a few people, maybe like 1 or 2, and then they'd quickly drop off again. The hardest part, I would say, in general, is that because we don't have like an entire organization where we have project managers, owners, and all this stuff creating such a concrete roadmaps, like right now, like this, and I think like generally a lot of the open source projects, not saying that it can't be this way, if we can get more people on board, but like we kind of like have been generally running lean, which means like the roadmap and stuff is very fuzzy inside the heads of just the people who are working on it, which usually is not very many. So it's just becomes like easier to do that, which of course the downside is that means it's not really written down in a good concrete way. But at the same time, like doing that takes a lot of time and effort as well. Which is usually why when you have companies, there's just so many different people and so many roles. But that's not to say that it can't be done, if that makes sense. The other thing I was going to say too is like a lot of the people like myself, Wes, and stuff use Express day in and day out. Like I have hundreds of projects that I manage that all use Express. And so part of it, that helps a lot because like, of course, like that means like I'm very like intimate with just how it works just from a user perspective. And so it makes it easier for me to, if you talk about like project parlance, right, I'm able to wear lots of different hats, as in like, I'm able to wear I'm able to wear the customer hat fairly easily since I am directly the customer in as well, which of course, ideally a lot of the open source projects end up being. It's hard sometimes because I've used open source projects that have gone downhill when the people who end up taking over the project don't actually use the project. So they don't actually understand like what is useful and what's not useful and what decisions make sense for the project. it becomes harder over time to use it as a user. And then you feel like you're fighting with the project maintainer just to like make it usable to you. I don't know. That's not specific to here. That's general. So I don't know. I'm not saying that this blocking anything here at all. I'm just saying like we've been running lean, if that makes sense. So we've just never really had a specific thing. We did try to do that. We tried to make some specific targets for Express 5. And I think that we, as engineers, sometimes we overestimate. We think there is more than we can, we see with our eyes and not with what we can, so like we put way too much into there, which we did learn that lesson. And we have been working to correct that since the end of last year and say, nope, all this stuff we have not even started yet. That's just not happening. Let's stop kidding ourselves and saying like, we'll have this stuff in Express 5, which people want, but we just haven't had time to actually build. So I think that like in a way we have been trying to correct that path by cutting down all of the stuff that we were trying to do in Express 5 and just, saying like, you know what, why don't we discuss it really when we actually have it kind of thing. And so, yeah, I know that, obviously this is a general comment. I mean, obviously the world has taken an unforeseen turn in events that I don't think we could have seen a few months ago, and has potentially impacted people's private time. Like Wes is usually always here. So the fact that he's not here, I think is likely related to that. I certainly can't speak for him because I don't know. Even I questioned whether or not I was going to be able to show up today because I do need to do some stuff related to some, because of some of the current world events, but I, still made sure I was going to take the time to actually be here today. It was a little bit of a personal struggle just because of that, which normally wouldn't be if it was the normal day-to-day work. So yeah, I don't like it. Yeah, it's hard to say exactly, but I mean, I think we are on the general right trajectory. I don't think we're where we could be, but I think we are getting there, if that makes sense. Basically, I'm trying to say is like the comment, so things moving slow, I think is technically true, but I think that we just being with the project for so long, I can tell that it is definitely revving up and ramping up over these past months for sure. I get every email that goes on there, and I'm talking about like people who actually participate in the project, not just people opening it from the outside. So I think that the participation has definitely been ramping up. I mean, just the amount of people at this meeting itself, I think, speaks a lot to that. But
Yeah, I can understand
Sorry.
from your perspective that as a person who basically makes sure you have the visibility to every PRs, that every work items that's getting opened and across the organization, and I can see the evidence of that. The amount of commitment and the time which you spend on this particular repo is amazing, and definitely you can't take the word slowness in a silly manner, because for you it's really a concern. From your perspective, I can see that you have spent a lot of time. So I'm sure it's a great thing, but sustainability is what I'm talking about. How long it's sustainable, how long you can do this in the same role in the future. For example, the critical project deliveries, the things, the breakage of the CI/CD pipelines, all those things. You as a single person being available versus not available, the whole project gets affected on that. So from that perspective, it would be worthwhile to start discussing about. I mean, I think in the beginning of the meeting, you already said one of the potential solution is to add more committers who are actually proven to be spending quality time on this project, or have either the necessary skills or have a paid support from their employees, whatever it is, whoever have shown the evidence of being in the project for some time, or whatever criteria you put for, is a probable way forward to help in the situation. Or we could actually discuss on potential solutions to this problem, this current situation, if that makes sense.
I think what's going on right now is basically like, well, rather, and I think that in general in the project right now, there's scaling issues, which are not new, or rather, they're not the same issues that I think that the project has probably experienced in the past. I think part of it is we now suddenly do have people, or we have started to get people that are involved, but because there's only so few people that have commit bit or are qualified to have a commit bit, like throwing committers alone at Express isn't going to specifically fix any of the big issues. So I think there's two scaling issues: committers, so people that can meaningfully contribute without breaking extra stuff or making a maintenance burden, to PRs that are either dead or left behind, or if somebody's busy, people can come up behind them and maybe fix or complete a PR, do the work. But also, I hate talking about process in open source, because in so many projects I'm involved in, we spend so much time talking about process. But I think that Doug hit the nail on the head in terms of a lot of the work is resting in the heads of the TC about what's happening next, what the priorities are, what needs to happen, et cetera. And I don't think we're going to be able to fix any of that stuff before V5 comes out, and maybe not even. It'll be something I think we'll finally be able to start working on in the future, in terms of like being able to create a framework or processes, which I hate talking about processes specifically, but in a project this big, we need at least some lean ones or something that help. But to be able to efficiently harness the people power that is beginning to be brought to bear on the project, et cetera. And I had an extremely interesting moment with Glenn too on session, just like an issue. Somebody wanted to add promises, and I reviewed the PR and I was like, oh, well, this is probably breaking for this reason, et cetera. And then Doug came in with knowledge about exactly why and how it was breaking and what they'd changed in the past, et cetera. And I was like, oh, it's one of those funny things where I was like, it's like, yeah, I couldn't have made the right call here probably on my own, or at least not without breaking somebody's crazy stuff somewhere. So I want to see the project get to that point where we can scale out really well, or better than we do now, and alleviate some of the bottlenecks of a whole bunch of prior knowledge being required. And also just, I think part of what Gurdesh is experiencing right now is that we have all these people that want to help, but it's not always clear what we can be doing with our time in order to directly move things forward. I think right now the best thing for that we can individually do is try to clear blockers for Doug and see what we can do in that regard to try to unblock him on the things that only he can be doing. So, like I said, I don't think we're going to fix any of that before V5, but that's one of the things I'm excited about for the project moving forward is maybe changing some of the code in some ways in further versions so that we can service tech debt and be able to allow people to make basically not have to have every single thing pass through Doug basically at some point, and to actually be able to bring to bear, let's say we had a group of 5 really good dedicated committers who could actually focus on an externalized, like, these are the goals, this is what we're doing next, and then we can just let people loose on it and actually get that work done without having to be redone every step of the way. So
yeah. And to just add, like, I just want to note that committers, it's that, just like what John was saying, like, the throwing people commit bits isn't really the problem, but just because someone can commit doesn't necessarily make them an actual, like, valuable committer, if that makes sense. Because if they're still not sure, like, when to merge PRs, they're still not sure how the project works, et cetera, like that, like, they're still kind of lost. So I just wanted to note that is that the issue isn't giving people permission just because we want to block it, if that makes sense. It's really just because, like, part of your thing you're asking right now is like, what can we do? It's like, well, if you're asking that question, like, that's obviously the first step, of things anyways, but it's just like, like a committer shouldn't be asking that kind of question, if that makes sense, because they should already have like, what do they want to do? Like, what is the plan kind of makes sense. So like, that's the idea, at least in my head, is that as, we got all these people, right, that we're getting it split out. I think that's the same thing in Wes's head, right? That's why we, we're work to like actually codify what it means to be this repo captain idea. So that way it's like we actually like have a thing that's, part of it is codifying is just to help us as we get to a larger group. It helps to all be, it helps us align ourselves together. When there's only like one person, there's no alignment necessary, because that person, it's whatever they want is the alignment. When it's two people, just in my experience, it's, typically they usually either have the same idea already, or it's 50-50, and then usually just one just kind of like just supersedes the other one, and then it usually just goes on from there. But once you start, the more people you add, the more potential different opinions there are, and the more the split becomes. And so getting alignment is sometimes helpful in that regard, which is why, codifying it. I don't know. Anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
One of the thing in Node.js which I have seen is, like, for example, I focus on the user support angle of it. I spend good amount of time helping addressing the issues that get raised in both the core as well as the Node.js/help repo. And I'm pretty much happy to be isolated working in that manner, while set of folks who look at test coverage, another set of folks dedicated their time on landing new PRs, and things like that, without really having much of overlap in terms of responsibility. There is no stated responsibility, nothing like documented, but we are happy in the way we are functioning. This gives a lot of advantage in terms of sustainability, scalability, and even quality, because a person who is happy, passionate about doing that particular job, ability to continue in that job without being a facade or being pulled into some urgent thing is really advantageous. I see Express do not have that leeway at this point, and that's probably why heavy reliance on one or two folks is happening at this point of time. So yes, you are right. It's not just the commit bits, but also about responsibility and overall understanding about the project, quality perspectives, security perspectives, and some maturity about looking from the field perspective. After all, is actually required before we actually look at that perspective. Yeah, but probably we should start thinking on those lines.
And just to reiterate, like, that's the idea, right? Is that we want to get everybody, like, part of what makes a committer is that, basically it's once you get to the point where it's like, your hand doesn't have to be held, I guess you could say, right? I mean, it's weird to put it that way, and I don't really mean it that way. It's just, it always feels different from like a workplace, right? Like in a workplace, everywhere I've worked, right? You hire a new person, you put them on a team, and you say, and you're on this team now. So the team is going to make it work, and they're going to have to, work with you. We actually got like a former intern that's on my team right now at work. And, it's basically been like, typically he still has to, because he was an intern, so it's not like he has a lot of like job, real world experience anyways, but still it's like, we're like constantly like, basically pair programming with him like every day, trying to, moving around between a few different people, and to build them up. Right. And so like, obviously that's, an extreme case because he used to be an intern, but like if you think about like your own work experience, that happens in a lot of ways too, right? It's like, I think like in a way we're kind of at that stage right now, but we actually, with just like experienced people with like the actual programming. So really it's just like building up the actual like knowledge for like, these different modules. And I think a lot of you are doing awesome things. Like, that's where I'm trying to also pay a lot of attention to. Like, just like John gave an example for Express session, like I was awake and I saw that person, that PR be opened right away. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to leave it here for a little bit. See if like anybody chimes in on it. And I'm going to let someone else give time for someone else to like say what their opinion is. Cause we had just talked about that in the last one. Before I even try to express my own thoughts or comments at all. Just because like, that's the ideal, right? I want to be able to like say, hey, look, like, a lot of these repos, we actually have like, people on them. Multer is a good example of that, where we have, Linus pretty much like leads that, like hands down. It's just one repo, but like that makes a big difference in a lot of ways. And I know it's a very popular one too. And as you guys saw when you were doing, some of you doing triage, like what, just like Express session, a lot of users it's complex. People have a lot of issues with it. And so it's really easy to get sucked in to the support aspect of some of these things. So yeah, I don't know what's wrong with that, but that's the idea, right? Is that we're working towards getting it to be more spread out work-wise, if that makes sense. And I don't want, and just to be clear, is that I don't want to be the single point of failure, if that makes sense. And that's why I'm so happy that we have you guys here that seem to be quite willing to be involved. And, I'm still seeing you guys like haven't gotten scared away from the project yet, which is awesome. And like, you're like responding, because that's how I started. I keep saying, I like to say that a lot to people, is like, I started without even, no one asked me, right? Like TJ was working on the project. I used Express a lot. I saw pull requests. I, just started like putting my opinions on them of just like what I thought about the pull request, what I thought about the feature, good and bad. Like, no, I don't think this feature is right for this project, or, for X, Y, Z, or yeah, this is awesome. I would love to have this feature. Because the hardest part about things is also denying things too, because accepting everything is not always the best case, but you don't want to just deny everything either. So it's just that weird, what makes sense. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but still, like, I guess I was just going to say, like, I think that like you guys have been doing awesome so far. And I really am so excited for, as we move on from here to really like get a lot of this stuff spread out more. And really, like, it's the whole point of open source is what you want to do, right? So like, I know some of you said you wanted to do Express sessions. So I just want to make it clear, like, you have the opportunities to do the module that you feel like you care about, if that makes sense. And so don't feel like you have to do a module just because that's what's available, if that makes sense. So I just want to, I guess, add that too. So like, there aren't any off limit ones, even Express itself, if you feel like you want to, though there isn't a lot of the complexity is out in those other modules, but still, I don't know, just depends on what you want to do. But on the 5.x note, I'm actually editing that 5.0 pull request right now to remove all that stuff that we were going to kick out of it. So we actually have that up to date, as far as like, taking roadmap that's here, putting it on GitHub for everybody. So I'm working on that while we're talking.
So
Anyway.
on that note, what is the normal proceedings for onboarding new committers? Do we open an issue in the discussion repo? Do we raise a PR for self-nominating, or what is the proceeding?
So it's codified in the contributing doc, or the collaborator guide, not the collaborator guide. Sorry, which one is it? Yeah, it's contributing. That's what I thought. Under becoming a committer, that's pretty much the steps right there. So
I read that. So that basically says that contributors with non-trivial commits should be onboarded as a committer.
Yep.
So that
exactly.
the part that is not clear to me is that who takes the initiation should be onboarded is a self-nomination, or it's driven by the TC, or it's like a nomination coming from another committer?
In the past, it usually comes from a TC, right? We say, hey, look, this person, is providing non-trivial contributions. So what that typically means is like someone who's making pull requests just to update a dependency. That's not really like, it's certainly a contribution, but it's not like a serious project one, right? Like doing things like what Glenn was kind of hinting at with like Express session and stuff like that is what I guess they codified it as non-trivial. This came from the Node.js project from our mentors back in the day. If we think it could be clarified further, we can certainly do that. But that's basically what it really is. Basically, it's saying like, hey, look, like I said, the issue isn't giving like commit bits, but like if you have one but still have not interacted with the project in any real way, like what are you going to do with it anyways? So that's kind of like how it's codified, is that basically it's like, look, they're basically like providing like real value to the project, give them commit bit. And that's really kind of like where the essence comes from. This is from Michael back when he was our mentor. He had wrote this up for us. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's not necessarily about who initiates the process. It's all about a conviction within the TC or the committer community,
Yeah,
or a confidence.
Right, because the idea is that people who have commit bit, they don't have to be babysat, right? Like no one's going to sit here and like watch over all these repos and like make for sure it's being done. Things are crazy stuff isn't happening. And then of course, like I think like John, I think might have alluded to, or maybe it was Glenn, then there's like a bunch of cleanup that's happening as well, etc. Like that's kind of like the idea, right? And like basically, like I think what Michael was trying to express between non-trivial is basically saying someone who has a grasp on the project, right? Like has a good understanding about how it all works, and like is able to like make good judgments, including like, because when you have commit, right, what do you do with that? Well, one of the things you do with it is you merge other people's PRs. Well, being able to really truly understand the product, to be like, yeah, look, you're missing in this area, or this needs to be fixed, or this interface doesn't belong with the rest of the interface, is ideally what someone would want to do, is ideally what would be done. And then you're like, yep, it matches all of like matches how the project should be done. So now I'm going to merge it, because I have commit bit. Making contributions itself, especially trivial ones, anybody can do. You don't need a commitment for that. You just make a pull request. And so that's kind of like where the essence of it comes from, right? Basically like, hey, if you have commit bit, like you're therefore going to be merging other people's pull requests. So like, this person ideally should be the one who's actually able to truly review these pull requests coming in. And he didn't really have a good way to like express that besides saying like, a non-trivial contribution. So like, ideally what that means is like someone who's made some serious code contributions, like probably has a really good grasp on the project, especially as they've gone through the review process themselves. In the process of getting on, he's very wishy-washy is how he'd put it up. I think that, like I said, if we want to open up an issue to like say clarify that more, we can certainly do that kind of discussion, if that makes sense. But that's kind of like my understanding for when he was our mentor and talking to us about it.
Thanks.
Like I said, it was set up by the Node.js TC itself. The two mentors we had were James and Michael. James is still part of Node. Michael is not.
Mm-hmm.
And they helped us set up this system based on kind of like Node.js itself in a way.
Yeah, I believe I went through the whole history of Express. Essentially, that structuring and mentoring part that happened, I guess, somewhere in 2016.
Yep.
So we're just about 15 minutes over the hour.
Right.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention time. Is there anything specific? I mean, I can always bow out. Doesn't matter. You guys don't have to stop. I need to go soon.
Nope. Yep. We should wrap up anyways, so that way people have like a, we don't want to keep everybody in their time, and also just the viewers there. I mean, I think we had a lot of discussions here. We'll try to sum it up in the meeting as well. That's the path forward right now for Express 5. We talked about those couple PRs. As after this meeting, I will continue to work on landing all of that. I cut really quickly. Like I said, I merged up what was in 4.x real quick into the 5 branch, so we have that there. And then, of course, as we'll get these things that we talked about landed, I put that milestone. Please, if you want to know, look at the milestone in Express to see what I've tagged for 4.18. I think triagers can also edit those too. So, if you find things that should be there or find things you think shouldn't be there, I mean, make that comment or whatever, and that way, we'll go there. I know I responded to John on his thing. If you don't get to it tonight, that's fine, John. I might push up some changes to your PR also for the deprecated one if I get to it tonight, to help move it along. If not, you're certainly welcome to make the changes you were thinking of making. So just let me know what you want to do there, and I'm happy to help get that moving as well. And basically, my comment is since that's the plan, is to just get this all out there. And so I'm not actually going to sit here and wait until you do it, if that makes sense. So that it's not going to be a blocker for waiting for you, if that makes sense. I'm happy to do it if that is desirable. You're also welcome to do it as well. And I won't say I'm going to do it, because I've made that mistake of making such a promise and then not gotten around to it. So
yeah, I'll work on that a little bit tonight. I will at the very least revert it so it just is doing response.status. I'll revert where I was putting rest.status everywhere to set the status, but yeah, we can link up on that on the PR. So,
but yeah, and so cool. We'll get all that done. So one of your questions earlier was a rough timeline, and so my thought is by this weekend, if that makes sense. I feel like that gives some leeway for just as things continue. But otherwise, that is part of my thought, is that to get the branch up and get that PR open tonight, continue to get the couple things landed, potentially all tonight. Otherwise, that's my goal, but I'm not sure how well that will work. Otherwise, continue tomorrow, and that basically will give us a little bit of a wiggle room, and get the 4.18 out there, get that merged into 5, right after that, and then land those other things in 5 over, in the following days, and then that will be our, next 5 release. And if that makes sense. Another area too, obviously, I'm just throwing this out there, it's up to you if you are interested in that, is I have a good feeling that we've missed things in that 5.x documentation that's been changed in the 5.x in the 5 code. So if anybody feels inclined to dig through it, feel free. That's not a hard requirement of any kind. People just run into the differences once they start trying to use Express 5 and realize there's differences, and then we'll just fix them. It's not really a big deal, but I just throwing that out there. It's pretty much just a clone of 4.x for the most part still. So,
so you mean to say, look at the items that are tagged as 5.x, look at the code changes, and look at the documentation and see if all the code is reflected, or all the major features are reflected in terms of the doc changes, and see if there is any gaps.
Yeah, and it would be specifically in the things we've already landed, as in things that have pending to land would probably need changes too. But I was more referring to even the things we've already landed, but we have not made progress on docs. Myself and Wes have both kind of meant to do it, but of course, we get caught up in actually trying to do the code changes, and so don't actually take the time to update the actual website. My comment was that the 5.x docs is mostly a clone of the 4.x docs, and it kind of was just left at that. So there's been changed and removed APIs that I think are still mentioned in the 5.x docs by accident.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. I know it's not. I know I don't have a specific list, but it's because I haven't actually looked through it. So I will eventually at some point. But if someone wants to, that'd be awesome.
Well, be careful what I volunteer for. I think I've learned that lesson quickly.
Yep.
I'm going to stick to learning the thing I said I'm going to learn, and I'm going to do it. I've got to run, gentlemen.
Cool. Yep. Me too. Like, all right. So we'll wrap up here. Any final things that anybody wants to say before we stop the meeting? All righty. So that concludes our technical committee meeting for May 25th, 2020.